Hey there. Ready for another deep dive? We got a mountain of articles all about sugar. You really want to get to the bottom of this, huh?
Yeah, sugar's got a pretty bad rap these days, doesn't it?
For sure. So we're going to tackle the big question. Is sugar really as bad as everyone says? And we've got some great sources to help us figure that out. First, we've got this Healthline article. It breaks down like 11 ways sugar can mess with your health. Then there's this one from Health Central, all about how sugar turns into fat in your body. Oh, and we've got a transcript from a podcast from the University of Utah, featuring a liver specialist who talks about what happens to all that sugar we eat.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
Oh, and one more. A super interesting article from the National Library of Medicine. It looks at sugar consumption in the U.S. over the last 50 years and whether there's a connection to rising obesity rates. So yeah, we've got a lot to unpack.
It's going to be a deep dive for sure.
But that's what we do, right? All right, let's jump right in. I want to start with that Health Central article, the one about sugar turning into fat. I think a lot of people have this idea, like if you eat a donut, poof, it instantly turns into fat on your hips.
Yeah, that's a pretty common misconception.
So is that actually true?
Not exactly. It's a bit more complicated than that. The article calls the process lipogenesis. It starts with digesting carbohydrates.
Okay, so carbs get broken down into glucose.
Right. And then insulin moves that glucose into our cells for energy.
Makes sense. We need glucose for energy. But what happens when there's more glucose than our cells need right then?
Well, that's when things get interesting. Our body stores that extra glucose as glycogen. It's kind of like an energy reserve.
Like a backup fuel tank.
Exactly. It's stored in our muscles and liver, ready to be used when we need a quick boost.
So if I'm like sprinting to catch the bus, that's glycogen kicking in.
You got it.
But I'm guessing there's a limit to how much glycogen we can store.
Right. Our glycogen stores can only hold so much. Once they're full, any leftover glucose gets converted into fat.
Ah, so that's where the fat comes in. Not instantly, but eventually if we keep overdoing the sugar.
Exactly. And the article pointed out that sugary foods are really easy to overeat.
Yeah, it's hard to stop at just one cookie.
So we're more likely to hit that glycogen storage limit
Mm.
and end up storing more fat.
Okay, so sugar doesn't magically turn into fat the second we eat it. But if we consistently eat more sugar than our body can use, it will eventually get stored as fat.
Precisely.
And that's just one of the ways sugar can impact our health. That Healthline article really blew my mind. With those 11 ways sugar can mess with us. Some were pretty obvious, like weight gain and the risk of type 2 diabetes. But some were totally unexpected.
Like what?
Okay, like how sugar can cause premature aging. I mean, wrinkles and sagging skin from eating too much sugar.
Right. That one surprised me too. But it makes sense when you look at what's happening at a cellular level. High blood sugar can trigger something called glycation. That's when sugar molecules basically glom onto proteins like collagen and elastin.
And those proteins are what keep our skin looking young and bouncy,
Oh,
right? So sugar is like attacking the very structure of our skin. That's kind of scary.
it is. And the article also talked about how sugar can speed up cellular aging by shortening our telomeres.
Telomeres.
Yeah, they're like protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes.
Oh, right. And the length of those telomeres is linked to lifespan and overall health. So shorter telomeres mean faster aging.
Right.
Wow. I had no idea sugar could do that. It's like all these hidden impacts that we don't even think about.
Exactly. It's not just about the extra pounds. Sugar can affect our health in so many ways.
Okay. Let's move on to the University of Utah podcast. I thought they did a great job explaining how sugar travels through our body, like following a sugar molecule on its journey.
Analogies are always helpful.
Right. So they start with the sugar rush, that burst of energy you get after eating something sugary.
Right. That's from a rapid spike in blood sugar levels.
But then comes the crash.
Exactly. That's because your pancreas releases a bunch of insulin to try and get that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells.
So it's like this rapid rise and fall of blood sugar.
Yeah. And that can leave you feeling tired and sluggish.
And often craving more sugar.
It's a vicious cycle.
And the liver specialist on the podcast talked about how all that excess sugar puts a lot of stress on our liver because the liver has to process all that glucose.
Right. And if we overload it with sugar constantly, it can lead to problems like fatty liver disease.
It's amazing how all these sources connect, like pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah. They all paint a bigger picture of sugar's impact.
Okay. Now I'm curious about something. All three of our sources, Health Central, University of Utah, and the National Library of Medicine, they all talk about the link between sugar and our gut bacteria. I've heard so much about gut health lately. But how does sugar fit in?
Well, it's a complex area of research. But we know those trillions of bacteria in our gut play a huge role in our overall health,
Right. Like they affect our digestion and immunity.
and even our mood and brain function.
Yeah,
And what we eat can significantly impact those gut bacteria.
for better or worse. So you're saying sugar can actually change the balance of bacteria in our gut.
That's right. You know how we always hear about good and bad bacteria?
Yeah.
Well, it's more nuanced than that. Different bacteria have different roles in the gut ecosystem.
So it's not just about having more good guys and less bad guys.
Exactly. It's about having a diverse and balanced community of bacteria.
Got it. So how does sugar mess with that balance?
Well, there are certain types of bacteria that thrive on sugar, specifically a group called firmicutes.
Firmicutes.
Yeah, they tend to flourish in a high sugar environment.
Is that a bad thing?
It can be. Some firmicutes are beneficial, but an overabundance of certain types has been linked to inflammation in the gut.
Inflammation. That's never a good thing.
Right. And chronic inflammation is a key driver of many health problems.
So sugar tips the scales in favor of these potentially inflammatory bacteria.
Exactly. Disrupting the balance of our gut microbiome.
Wow. This is all starting to connect.
It is, and the National Library of Medicine article dives even deeper into this connection, suggesting that this imbalance in gut bacteria might be linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and even autoimmune conditions.
Seriously. So sugar's impact on our gut goes way beyond just digestion.
Right. It affects our whole body.
Okay. We've covered a lot already.
Uh,
And we haven't even touched on that National Library of Medicine article about sugar consumption and obesity in the U.S.
yeah, that one's packed with information.
Maybe we can save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds like a plan. Gives us all a chance to process everything.
Definitely. So before we took a break, we were about to dive into that National Library of Medicine article, the one about sugar consumption and obesity in the U.S. This article takes a historical perspective, looking at trends over the past 5 decades. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's a great way to see how our eating habits have changed and how those changes might be connected to our health.
Exactly. So the article starts by pointing out that sugar consumption in the U.S. increased drastically between 1970 and 1999.
A pretty significant jump.
Right. And a big chunk of that increase came from high fructose corn syrup, which became a really common ingredient in processed foods and drinks during that time.
That's important to note because fructose is metabolized differently than glucose. Some research suggests that excess fructose might be more easily converted into fat, especially visceral fat.
Visceral fat.
Yeah, the kind that surrounds our organs. And it's linked to some pretty serious health risks.
Oh, wow. So not all sugars are created equal.
That's right.
And what's even crazier is that this surge in sugar consumption happened at the same time as a huge increase in obesity rates.
A pretty striking correlation.
It's not a simple cause and effect thing.
Yeah.
But it definitely suggests that sugar plays a role in the obesity epidemic. But here's the interesting part. The article says that sugar consumption in the U.S. actually started to decline after 2000.
Really?
Yeah. And guess what? The rate of increase in obesity also slowed down.
Wow. That's pretty compelling evidence. It suggests that reducing sugar intake could help curb the obesity epidemic.
For sure. But even with that decline, the average American still eats way more added sugar than is recommended.
Yeah, we still got a long way to go.
So this is what I'm wondering. Can we just exercise our way out of this sugar problem? Like if we burn enough calories, does it matter where those calories come from?
That's a great question, and it's a pretty common misconception. Exercise is super important for our health, and it can definitely help offset some of the negative effects of sugar. But it's not a free pass to eat all the sugar we want.
Ah, okay. So even if I'm hitting the gym every day, I still need to be mindful of my sugar intake.
Exactly. Remember all those things we talked about, how sugar can disrupt our gut bacteria and contribute to inflammation?
Yeah.
Well, those processes are happening regardless of how much we exercise.
So exercise can't undo all the damage.
It can help, but it's not a magic bullet.
Makes sense.
It's like trying to put out a fire while someone's still pouring gasoline on it.
Oh, wow.
You got to address the source of the problem.
So we got to focus on what we're eating.
Exactly. It's about the quality of our calories, not just the quantity.
And that Health Central article talked about prioritizing fiber and protein to help us feel full and satisfied.
Right. Instead of sugary foods that just give us empty calories.
Okay. So exercise is great, but it's not an excuse to go crazy on sugar.
Exactly.
We've got to be mindful of both our diet and our lifestyle.
It's all connected.
This has been so eye-opening. It's clear that sugar is way more complicated than I thought.
It is.
But now that we know all this, what can we actually do about it? Like, how can we reduce our sugar intake without feeling totally deprived?
That's the key, isn't it? Sustainability. Drastic changes are rarely sustainable. It's about finding what works for you and making gradual changes that you can stick with.
Small steps, progress over perfection. But where do we even start?
Well, a good first step is awareness. Start paying attention to where added sugar is hiding in your diet.
It's not just candy and soda, right?
Right. Sugar can be lurking in things you wouldn't expect, like yogurt, granola bars, even salad dressings.
Sneaky sugar.
It is. So read those labels carefully.
Okay. Label reading 101.
And get familiar with all the different names for added sugar, like fructose corn syrup, sucrose, dextrose, maltose. The list goes on.
It's like sugar has a million disguises.
You got it.
But what about those times when I'm really craving something sweet? Any tips for dealing with sugar cravings?
Cravings are tough. They can be triggered by all sorts of things, physiological, psychological, even environmental.
So it's not just about willpower.
Not at all. Sometimes a craving is your body's way of saying it needs something.
Like what?
Well, a craving for chocolate could mean you need more magnesium.
Interesting.
So before you reach for the candy bar, try drinking some water.
Yeah.
Or having a piece of fruit.
Huh.
Or a handful of nuts.
Okay. So listen to my body.
Exactly.
And what about having healthy alternatives on hand? Like if I know I always want something sweet after dinner, I can have some berries and yogurt ready to go.
That's a great strategy. Be prepared.
And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Right. It's a journey. There will be slip-ups along the way. But that's okay.
As long as we keep learning and moving forward.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm definitely more aware of sugar's impact on my body.
Me too.
But now I'm kind of wondering, what if instead of just focusing on reducing sugar, we focused on adding more naturally sweet and nourishing foods to our diets?
I love that idea.
Like instead of approaching it from a place of restriction, we shift our mindset to one of abundance,
Yeah.
embracing all the delicious and healthy ways to enjoy sweetness.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Because food should be enjoyable.
Right. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about finding that balance, nourishing our bodies while still savoring the sweetness of life.
Perfectly said. This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. We've explored so much about sugar, from how it's processed in our bodies to its connection to obesity and the surprising ways it can affect our health.
We've even delved into the fascinating world of gut bacteria.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. If we were to reimagine our relationship with sweetness, moving beyond processed sugars, what are some ways we can appreciate the natural sweetness found in whole foods? And how might that shift impact not only our physical health, but also our overall well-being?
That's a powerful question. It challenges us to think differently about sweetness.
And to explore a more mindful and holistic approach to food.
Exactly.
And on that note, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. Share your thoughts, your struggles, your aha moments. Let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
Until next time, happy diving.
It's not just about cutting things out. It's about what we add in. You know, focusing on those whole foods, the ones that really nourish us and taste amazing too.
Right. Instead of feeling restricted, we can celebrate all the delicious things out there.
Exactly.
It's a whole new way of thinking about food, one that supports our health and makes us feel good.
I remember, it's a journey, not a race. We don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, there will be days when we reach for that cookie or that slice of cake.
And that's totally okay.
We're all human.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Right. Finding that balance.
Yeah.
And making choices that we can stick with.
Choices that support our long-term health goals.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much about sugar and how it affects my body.
Me too.
We've covered so much ground, from how sugar turns into fat, to its impact on our gut health, and even how it can speed up aging.
We've even talked about how sugar consumption has changed over time and what we can do to make healthier choices.
It's been quite the journey.
It really has.
But most importantly, I think we've both learned a lot about ourselves and how we can have a healthier relationship with sugar. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to say thank you to our amazing listener for sending in all those fascinating articles.
And for joining us on this journey of discovery.
We hope you learned something new.
Okay.
And feel inspired to take control of your health.
And remember, we're always here to support you.
Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.